Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the functional diagnostic nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. All right, hello my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 464 of the Health Detective Podcast. We have a fun guest today, and he probably knows that he's fun, but he doesn't know how cool this is. There's a lot of mutual connections, and guys, sometimes we're able to talk a little bit more behind the back room before we are live, but he doesn't know any of what I'm about to say yet, so it's kind of fun. Either way, we'll get into that in just a moment and introduce him properly in a few seconds here. Before that, I did want to shout out what is starting next week, November 10th through December 1st. We are doing a kind of a Black Friday extravaganza, if you will, here at FDN. For those of you that have been around for some time, you might know that every June, we do something called Summer Open House at FDN. It is my favorite time of the year. I hate being online so much when it's beautiful outside, right? You want to be outside a little bit more in June. But I have to say that it is overall my favorite time here at FDN because I get the privilege of going live with you guys like 40 times normally in that month of June. And there's something for everyone, for people that aren't FDNs but are just interested in functional healthcare, functional medicine. There's stuff for FDN trainees and there's stuff for FDN graduates. So that works so well for us in June that we said, well, what the heck? Let's do a mini version of that in November. So that all starts on Monday. So I'll be a little MIA on the podcast. We did have some ones that were already scheduled beforehand. But if you don't see me live as much for the remaining weeks in November, that is why. The events are completely free. You can join us at fdntraining.com/FDN Black Friday. That's fdntraining.com/FDN Black Friday. And very quickly, so the reason that anyone would want to come to this is we are presenting live case studies to you guys, mold illness, Hashimoto's, people that have actually overcome these things. We'll have our practitioners presenting on this stuff, showing you the lab results, showing the protocols, and how their clients got to a much better place of health. We have business success sessions. So I know most of us get into this for the health side, and then we say, well, hey, how could I do this when I grow up? How could I actually go do this as work? So you do have to understand the business side as well. So we have FDNs with businesses in the multiple six figures, even with just one employee. We actually have some FDNs, believe it or not, in the seven-figure range. And they are going to be presenting as well, teaching you what they've learned throughout their years as an FDN practitioner. Finally, for those that are not an FDN, of course, you would enjoy all of those sessions as well. But we have some behind the scenes stuff. We'll be showing you things that normally only trainees of the course get to see. We'll also be showing you things that only graduates of the course get to see. And then my two favorite events of the month, I'm totally biased to this. It's nothing against our other speakers. It's just these are the most fun events, are the keynotes. So we have multiple keynotes this time. That's why I have it as plural. Normally it's only one, but we have an opening keynote this event and a closing one. So that'll be on November 10th and December 1st, respectively. Both start at 1 o'clock Eastern. Please mark your calendars. They are very impressive FDNs with very significant followings and awesome businesses. So it's just like an inspiring thing, if nothing else. I always leave those talks ready to go into the next thing or next chapter and start something cool. So we hope to see you there, fdntraining.com/FDN Black Friday. If that link is giving you any trouble, we've had some people say for whatever reason that it actually did need to be all capital letters for the FDN Black Friday thing. So check that out. And if you're listening to this on audio or a little bit afterwards, if you're within any time of November 10th to December 1st, still go to that link because it's free and we're going to have events the entire time. All right. Thank you for letting me get through that. I'd like to get to our guest now. So Brian Sanders is the filmmaker behind the Food Lies documentary, host of the Top 5 Nutrition podcast, Peak Human, and an international speaker. He graduated from UCLA with a degree in mechanical engineering. He's the founder of Sapien Center, a popular health club in Austin, and he also works to spread the awareness of regenerative agriculture and increase access to well-raised animal products through his nationwide meat and body care company, Nose to Tail. So I'm finally going to get off the cliffhanger here, Brian, and explain why this is so cool. But first, I just wanted to welcome you to the show and thank you for being with us today.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. So you and I, are you recording at the Sapien Center right now, or do you record at your home?
I have my own studio at home now.
Okay. Well, either way, we're probably still very close because when I was doing my research on you for this last week for the podcast, I almost purposely wanted to stay somewhat ignorant so that this could be as authentic as possible. But I saw Sapien Center in Austin, Texas. So that is exactly 2 miles from me. I just moved here with my wife 2 months ago. We're downtown near Rainy Street. And
Mm.
then take it a step further. I go to your website and you have that beautiful picture with all those lovely, healthy human beings on it.
Mhm.
I recognize one as Brianne Gates, who used to actually do sales for us here at FDN. So I was involved with her for a
Oh,
while.
wow.
And then the bottom right corner, this is about as funny as it gets. This guy doesn't know me yet, but I believe his name's Jason Belisha. Is that his last name?
I'm not sure.
Oh, all good, all good. I'm sure you deal
Yeah,
with a lot of people. So there's
yeah.
this guy Jason in the bottom right of your screen there, and
Mhm.
his company, at least not him personally, he is the one that creates all these setups. He's that on-screen authority guy that helps people create studios for their house. So I'm just
Oh.
like, Austin has 1 million people. It's the 11th most populated city in the country, and yet somehow there is so many connections that have already happened here for me with 2 months. So I'm very excited to check out your center. I know that you guys also provide people with access to certain types of foods. So I was so happy to find out about this in the last week, and just thanks for what you're doing. So if you guys are in Austin or the surrounding area, please make sure to check out his stuff. We'll shout it out a little bit more directly at the end. But I digress. Let me not get ahead of myself here. Brian, we start the same way for every guest that comes on this show, assuming that it's relevant to them. And this is the part I stayed ignorant on because I wanted it to be authentic.
Mhm.
All I know from the notes that you filled out for us is that you do have a health journey and that you're willing to share it. I don't know what that looks like. So I'd like to ask you, my friend, what were your first health symptoms and when did they begin?
Wow, yeah, and come by, we're having a Friendsgiving. Come to the Sapien Center Friendsgiving. I'll send you details, and if you're
Thank you.
listening, you might be able to come too. Anyway, I was the average 30-year-old. This was 12 years ago. I'm 42 now. I turned 30. I actually lost both my parents around that time too. So that's a big part of my journey, is waking up, trying to figure out how I can not fall to the same fate. And I was turning into the average American dad bod. I had, 20 pounds of extra fat. I had all these conditions. I had acid reflux and allergies and bad knees, inflammation in my arms and my knees, just not living well. I was quitting playing sports. It wasn't some huge thing, but I think for a lot of people, it's not some one huge thing unless it is a tragic situation. It's just you take a look at yourself and you're like, "Oh, I'm 30 now," and you make all the excuses like, "Oh, this is what it's like being 30. Ha ha ha." I can't play sports. Oh, I'm just overweight now. And I changed my diet pretty simply, and my whole life changed. All my problems went away. I never get sick anymore. All the conditions went away. My allergies went away. It was just incredible. And now I play sports almost every day, either lifting or sports or sprinting. I have zero pain. Like I just feel like invincible. Feel like I'm invincible now. I don't get sick. I haven't been sick really in 8 years. Um, it's just amazing. So I started making my Food Lies series 8 years ago. It's still not even out yet. But the high level view is I just wanted to let people know how easy it was to change your life, change your health with some simple diet and lifestyle changes.
I mean this seriously. I give you a lot of props for that because most of the people that come on the show, including myself, we had to kind of go through some really traumatic health issues before we
Mm,
were aware enough to realize that the human body is not meant to feel that way. And we switched some things around. So I think we need people like you out there that are letting individuals know that, hey, you don't have to wait until you have 10 different diagnosed conditions to get into this game and start feeling a lot better. So I have to ask, you mentioned the dietary stuff, and I do have already an idea of what you're into personally. But
mhm.
what were some of the first dietary changes or other changes that you made? Because for you being 42, and then you're saying sports every single day, no pain. That's amazing. So what were some of the first changes you made?
Mm. Yeah, it's is really about eating more real food. I actually ate more animal foods. My whole life, I was avoiding red meat. I was kind of doing what the government guidelines said. My family was too. So they were doing the things, eating low fat products, avoiding red meat, eating whole grains, all this stuff, pasta and just low fat foods and doing what we thought was right. We weren't eating out a lot. And they got these chronic diseases. They got Alzheimer's and cancer. And I learned too that that's not just a genetic thing. I was at an event today just now, and the guy was like, "Oh, well, that's just genetic." And I was like, "Okay, how do we get into a discussion about this without getting into an argument?" Because he just is convinced that everything is genetic. And he's like, "Oh, you're just lucky." I'm like, no, no, no. At 30, I was feeling terrible and I was going downhill, and I completely changed that. And he didn't quite believe me. But anyway, uh, it was eating more animal foods. It was eating less processed foods. It's eating more whole foods, really. So I learned to not be afraid of red meat or eggs, butter, using real fats instead of vegetable oils. Not eating pasta bread much anymore. Just leaning more into real foods, and that's it. It was so easy and simple, and I just had to change my habits, and then everything got better.
Were you reading any books on this at the time, or around people who were into this kind of stuff? And the only reason that I ask is because for many of our practitioners, we come to almost identical conclusions. That's how we end up feeling better. But I know for me, when I first got into this space, I didn't have a bias one way or the other, Brian. I just wanted to feel better. So I've done vegetarian. I even did like mostly vegan for about 9 months. Again, I have come to these conclusions now that I feel significantly better on animal products. I also am objectively better because we track everything at FDN with labs. So I'm impressed it seems like that was almost like the first thing that you got into when it's easy to fall into another path. So who or what was influencing that specific path when you got into this health stuff?
Yes, I didn't do it alone. Well, my friends were getting into it, luckily, and they just lost all this weight and felt amazing. But
There we go.
they and I read The Primal Blueprint by Mark Sisson. So Mark, now he's a friend of mine, and he's sort of a mentor of mine, and now a friend, and I credit him for everything. And his stuff still stands. He wrote the book, I don't know, 17 years ago, something like that. And it's just the simplest principles that just get yourself into a more human environment. And I've kind of
Sure.
adopted along the way and made my own Sapien. It's like, I think there's a Sapien framework. It's just really about aligning to nature more in your diet and your lifestyle and in life, and everything just falls into place.
And by the way, thank you, because that makes a lot more sense. Like there's guys, people are listening is my point, and obviously that's a larger name that you just mentioned, but just sharing stuff on social, guys, letting friends and family know that there's other things out there. People are waiting and actually quite literally dying for this information. So you got to just spread it, and you never know who's going to listen or benefit from it. With that said, I would like to know when you decided that this is going to be what you do with your life, because there's two categories, right? There's those of us who have such profound experiences with this that we end up making it our career. I can't do anything else now at this point. But you had that mechanical engineering background. From my understanding, I'm a little ignorant about it, but from my understanding, that's not a particularly low-paying field. That's solid. It's respectable. I got to be smart to do that. So it can't be the easiest thing in the world to make the decision that, hey, now I'm going to open up centers. I'm going to try this food lies thing. Like, when did you decide that, hey, I actually want to pursue this from a career perspective?
Yeah, it was a few years in. So I did it on my own. I felt all the differences. I believed in it. And then I just wanted to tell other people. I was in tech too. So I was in mechanical engineering. Yeah, I made decent money in tech. I made more money, and I gave it all up to just go on my own with no plan. I had no income, no plan, and I figured out along the way. But yeah, it was a crazy leap, but it was very worth it. And I I went full time 8 years ago. So that's when I just quit the job and just went all in. I made a website, foodlies.org. It's still there. I should probably update it. It's an 8-year-old website now. But I also saw What the Health. It was a vegan film. And I just was very I guess I wasn't angry. I think any dietary change is good, and any people like looking to more whole foods and taking health into their own hands is great. But I just didn't like the vegan messaging, and so I just said, "Hey, I can make my own thing. I'm gonna make my own film," because I grew up doing film and video. So I finally got back to that. Yeah.
So, for those that don't know, by the way, I haven't brought this up for a while on this podcast, and I appreciate you being, I feel like you're being very respectful to it. So, What the Health, and guys, fact check me on it, because you're not going to believe it at first. Go to vegan.com. Yes, that's a thing. And if you type in on their search bar, What the Health, you will find that the science behind that documentary was so bad and so inaccurate that the owner of vegan.com has a blog article from there and says, we do not want, although they support the vegan movement, obviously, that's why they
Mhm.
have that website, they do not want to be associated with the science behind what your
Mm.
health because it is inaccurate. That is the owner of vegan.com. So, one, even if people like Brian and I maybe disagree with them from the eating perspective, I already love that person. I don't know them. I love someone that is consistent like that and could have used that documentary to promote their own thing and said, you know what? No, I don't want to do it this way. I want to do it a way that works for me. So I have huge respect for that person, even though I might disagree with how they eat. But please check that out. That's how bad it was that even the vegans are shouting about it. So let's talk about that phrase food lies, because I'm guessing maybe there was some inspiration from those documentaries and things like that. What lying is going on, and why do you believe it's happening? I know those are two big questions, so
Mm.
I'd love to know, what lies are going on and why do you believe that they're happening?
Yeah, this is all I think about. It's such a fascinating deep dive, right? So you got to go way back. You got to go back 100 years to look at where these lies started. And a lot of people don't know that they're even lying. I don't want to say, I mean, I respect doctors. They're trying to do the right thing, but they are perpetuating lies because that's how they were taught. So I think a lot of the stuff in the mainstream paradigm is wrong, and it's wrong because of big industry. So you really trace it back to big industry. There's big money in promoting this certain narrative, right? And I learned kind of about this the hard way. You mentioned Nose to Tail as the company I started along the way. We were selling regenerative meat, the best raised meat you could get. And I didn't make any money. I did it for 4 years selling this meat. I had ranchers in Texas. We were getting it out to people. There's no profit margin on meat. There's no profit margin on strawberries or lettuce or anything. Any real food there's just no profit margin, right? Any processed food, huge profit margin. That's how they make their money. But I didn't really understand that exactly. I just thought, oh, if I start big a company, if I have a lot of fans and people who will buy it, I'll make money. You don't. It's because of the profit margin. So if you trace that back, that's why the world is the way it is. There's so much profit margin on processed foods that they control the narrative. They have billions and billions to do marketing, fake studies, lobbying, right? So that they want to keep this system. And so uh, yeah, it really. I don't know. I don't want it to make it sensational. Trying to say that there's this big conspiracy and that everyone's evil and right, but it is kind of just a long history of making a ton of money on shelf stable foods that have very low nutritional value. And it started 100 years ago, right? Over 100 years ago, there's Crisco, and there's a whole story of them taking like all these leftover cotton seeds and it was used to be a machine lubricant, and then they did like some 12-step process to deodorize and make them safe for humans to eat, and we started eating them, and then now they're all these foods could be made and have longer shelf lives, and we just use subsidized corn, wheat, and soy. We use tons of sugar, processed grains, industrial oils to make foods that are highly profitable, less nutritious, and that created a big industry, whether we knew it at the time or not. Then that turned into the medical system too, and the medical system, learned that they could make a whole bunch of money on pills and procedures instead of doing root cause medicine like you guys all do with functional medicine, right? It's like, let's look at the root cause. Also, quick aside, that's the engineering approach, right? I'm a mechanical engineer. So
Yes.
I didn't get indoctrinated into that pills and procedures system becoming a doctor. So people are like, well, why are you in the nutrition world? Well, I'm like, well, I came at it from a root cause perspective, and I just interview a lot of doctors and scientists, and I'm not trying to say that I know everything. I'm just boiling down the information, being a communicator of this information. So I guess to recap, it's a whole bunch of industry funded thing. They want to keep the gravy train going, right? There's a bunch of details we can get to along the way, but it's a huge tanker ship, right? And you can't turn that thing around very easily. And they're making tons of money, even big food, big ag, big healthcare, big sick care. I'm sure you probably call it that as well. That they're just making way too much money, and it's just hard to change those narratives.
Well, and I'd love to get into some of those details because, Brian, I mean, it's so easy to talk about this stuff on like a lot of mainstream podcasts. Talk about the corruption and sides of things, but I like that you actually took. I already really love talking to you because you took that approach of I don't want to sensationalize this. You're just trying to be real about what's going on, and at least my goal, I don't know if I always achieve that, but my goal is to do the same thing because I do think people need to be aware of some of the wrongdoings out there, but then understand it's not as simple as, oh, just, yeah, everyone in a certain system's evil. But I mean, literally,
Mhm.
genuinely, some evil things have occurred. And I want individuals to know where to draw that line. Because I think some of our practitioners, especially, they are salt of the earth people. They're the best people that you'll ever meet. And they can't comprehend. Just like it's almost, if I'm being honest, I don't want to directly compare it, but it almost is
Mhm.
like when you watch a serial killer documentary and people like you and I cannot comprehend how a human being is able to do that to someone else. It would never even cross our mind. And so similarly, when you hear about some of the dirtiness and the corruption that has occurred at the highest levels in these industries, you're like, what? That it can't be real because you and I would never do that. So I'd like to focus on then the facts of it all. And please, with what I'm about to say, challenge me if you
Mhm.
think any of it's wrong. I've been in the space for 12 years now. I started at 18. My conclusion as of today, and it might change tomorrow, but my conclusion as of today is I think all of these industries are mostly made with great, well meaning people. Like the average doctor that you go down the street and talk to. That person went to school, they worked their butt off. They're probably trying to make their family proud in some way by getting such a prestigious type of thing in society.
Mhm.
And I don't know many doctors, as you probably don't either, that look like they're sitting on the fountain of youth in their back office and then tricking me in their front office. In fact, they normally look like hell, with all due respect. So they're in that same system as well. So it can't be them. Then you go up to the pharmaceutical rep, the average pharmaceutical rep. Well, I don't think that person's trying to do anything wrong either. It looks like they have a job and they believe that they're doing something half decent and they're trying to make a living. So it's not them either. So at a certain point, though, you go up higher in that, no pun intended, really lame joke here, that food chain, and you
Mhm.
start to find certain things that objectively we can look at as bad. So you mentioned fake studies. I want to talk about that if we can. One of the fake studies that I always reference is Monsanto, which is now under Bayer, guys, which is very ironic that a pharmaceutical company bought a
Mhm.
GMO company, but that's besides the point. They got successfully sued for having a Stanford scientist ghostwrite studies. And anything I'm saying right now, please, again, double fact check me
Mhm.
on that. I don't want to just spew BS on here. So this is what we're up against is someone somewhere in that company thought it was appropriate to pay off and offer a scientist, and then that scientist took the money. So that's one of the ones I know is fake, but I never know how deep this goes. Are you aware, Brian, then of any other fake studies that people can look up for themselves and should be aware of off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, I know there's some with the Alzheimer's research, which is,
Okay.
and there's some also there's a big story in the New York Times. It was from a while ago about the Harvard scientists that they paid off. There was only 50K of money to say that sugar was not the problem and that fat was the problem. So that's kind of a famous one that they paid off scientists to do that. I think there's just a lot. I mean, there's also another one. I don't remember the specific one. I think there's just a lot of them. Is you look at pasta, that's an example. I'm just not into just normal American pasta, right? It's just a bunch of enriched bleach flour, and I don't think it's helping anyone. Yet there's all these studies that say pasta is healthy. And you look at who's funding the studies, and it's Barilla, right? This is a huge multinational corporation that makes pasta, and they're the ones funding these studies. So I don't know. I can't call them fake studies. I loosely say fake studies, but um, really people don't know that. Well, maybe people listening know, but a lot of people don't know it's not easy to get studies funding. Who's gonna fund a study about real food, right? I mean, sometimes the NIH does fund some of these studies, right? But otherwise, it's pasta companies that are funding them.
And so people fully understand this. You're saying that why would someone fund this on the real food side when there's really no profit to be had? But there is huge incentive if I can show you why my food product or fake food product is somehow good for you. That's why I would be running the studies there because I have a financial incentive. And if I don't like the results, then maybe I just edit it.
100%. And they don't have to share the results. They've done a lot of studies and they don't have to publish them. Same thing with pharmaceuticals. They don't have to publish the results if it doesn't go in their favor.
Wow. So And by the way, I'm sorry, I asked you kind of two questions before. I want to make sure
Yeah.
if you do disagree with me, please tell me. It's fine. My conclusions, though, are that there are some very bad apples that have a tendency to find themselves at the top of these organizations. Most of the individuals below them are fantastic people that
Mhm.
mean well. And clearly, those people at the top are willing to sacrifice any ethics and morals in order to make a quick profit. That's where when I say corruption, that's what I mean is we're really just up against a few bad apples. It's just sad to say that those few bad apples, they're probably highly intelligent, regardless of whether or not we want to admit that. I don't think they're stupid. And I think they have a lot of money behind them. Do you agree that that's primarily where it's coming from today, or would you add or take anything away from that?
No, that's exactly how I think of it. Everyone mostly is well-meaning. Yes, I always say that doctors are great. I don't want to disparage doctors because they've just been trained a certain way. Their whole life has been indoctrinated. I love that word because it has doctor in it, into this system. And there's only a few people that are really the bad actors. And some of them are even dead by now. I mean, this stuff started, like I said, 100 years ago, 50 years ago. So I always say, I use the same example. The CEO of Monsanto thinks he's a great guy. The CEO of Coca-Cola, McDonald's thinks they're great people. The Monsanto CEO, I'm providing a better way to make grain, these crops more abundant and easier to grow, and I'm doing the world a service, right? I think this person generally thinks that, and yeah.
Oh no, sorry, I was just thinking. I I like that you mentioned the history of it too and how long this is going on because it was my dad actually. My dad takes a very well, not nowadays. When I first
Mhm.
started, though, he took a very optimistic approach to
Mhm.
this, and didn't necessarily believe there was any corruption. He certainly has changed that viewpoint because you can prove. I mean, dude, you can prove it to people. Like again,
Mhm.
we're talking about stuff that you can look up. Like you can't tell me that Monsanto didn't ghostwrite studies. Obviously, someone there is willing to do it. And then there's a great book called Seeds of Deception. It's actually if Brian and I did even 1/10 of what Monsanto has done, you and I would be in jail and would never be allowed to own a business. But when you have enough money, you can buy these things out and make things go away. So look up Seeds of Deception, great book. But my point in saying that is my dad was right, I believe, on one thing. Let's take the tobacco industry, for example. There wasn't rigorous science going on at certain times in history. So is it fair to say that people genuinely believed that tobacco was just great and profitable? I think that's probably
I think,
true. I'm sure the same people were smoking cigarettes.
yeah, and doctors recommend this brand of cigarettes. I think there
Yes.
is a certain amount of it. Okay, I look to human psychology. The deeper you go, you realize there's some fundamentals of being human, and we have certain motivations and self-preservation. And I really think that that's part of being human is if I've just worked up this corporate ladder and then all of a sudden I'm at whatever kind of company it is, and my livelihood is on the line, I am highly, highly incentivized, whether I know it or not, and biased, whether I know it or not, that I'm going to continue this narrative. And if I have to do, if I think even without even doing anything specific, like paying off people, you have to just put your head in the sand a little bit. And I say, whether you know it or not, I think a lot of people, they don't realize that there's so much motivation that this huge salary, you have a mortgage, you have a family. If I start to even doubt some of the things that this company or that is paying me is saying, then I will not be able to survive. I will lose my house. I will lose my family, and so that is a very strong thing. I think that happened with COVID. A lot of people had to go along with the narrative, whether they knew it or not. There's all different narratives in COVID, but that just because of self-preservation, right? You have to think this way, and it's a part of it's a part of our human brains, right? It's unavoidable.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think we have to keep ourselves in check with that. um, Yeah, that's a whole separate conversation, I suppose. So, one of the things that I wanted to make sure we got to today, because it's important to you, you put this in the notes even, is you want to make sure that people never fall for one of these quote unquote diets ever again. So, and I probably falsely assume this, when I hear someone say that I eat a lot of animal products, my initial thing is, okay, well, this person must be either paleo, quote unquote, for those in audio, or carnivore, and maybe you don't subscribe to that. So, my question for you is one, do you subscribe to any particular diet yourself, or is it not that simple? And then two, how can other people truly avoid falling for the next diet or the next thing that happens to come out in 6 months from now?
Yeah, I'm human as well. I was into a lot of different diets along the way. What I did initially was avoid a lot of carbs, right? And it actually was a lot of processed carbs that I was avoiding. But I had this view that all carbs were bad and that carbs were going to kill you. And in those certain worlds, there's low carb, keto, carnivore worlds, that is the narrative. And I'm still friendly. I'm still in these communities, right? It's not like I think that they're wrong. It's just they don't look at it at a higher level, right? If you keep zooming out, you learn more and you have to be unbiased. You kind of have to prove yourself wrong and be open to change. And I think it's kind of general, it's another human flaw maybe that we believe we have biases, or we do the first diet and it works for us, and so we have to go spread the word. This is the only way to do it, right? So the vegans are the same thing, right? It's like people go vegan, and so they're eating processed foods and all these bad things. And then they became intentional about their diet. They started eating more whole foods. And now they think this is the only way to do it. It must have been the meat. We have to, everyone in the world has to be vegan. And the same thing with the carnivores. And it's just not true. I mean, it's somewhere in the middle. So along the way, I just kept zooming out. I didn't want to be wrong. I've been working 8 years on this series. I want to put it out to last another 10 years at least and hold the test of time, stand the test of time, and not be wrong. So when you keep zooming out, I'm like, what do all good diets have in common, and what do all good diets leave out? Right. And then, and throughout history too, I'm not even talking about right now, just throughout history. And when you do that, you kind of just come to that humans are really adaptable. We live in all different environments, and many different types of diets can work. So it's confusing to me in the beginning. It was like, why are there people like the Maasai and the hunter-gatherers, the Hadza in Tanzania, they can be eating almost all animal products and they're healthy. Yet there's people closer to the equator or in other times throughout history that were eating almost all plant products. How are they healthy? Well, it's because they are including some animal nutrition. All populations have always included at least some animal nutrition, actually as much as our environment afforded. All populations throughout history exploit their environment as much as possible to get the most amount of animal foods, whether it's dairy or eggs or even insects, anything. We've always been looking for animal nutrition, and we've always had whole foods. So only consistency in all diets, what they do well and what they leave out, is whole foods base. Throughout history, we haven't even had processed foods really up until grains, 12,000 years ago, but they were less processed and they weren't covered in glyphosate. And so for all of history, so really that's what you can boil it down to is you need a majority of whole foods in your diet, and you need to have some animal foods. And beyond that, there is a lot of personal individualization that can happen from there. So there's a little more to it. And we talk about the nutrient to energy ratio, nutrient density. There's more things to look at it, bioavailability and stuff and like how to optimize a diet. And it's not like I'm saying, okay, I have no answers for you. Just go eat whatever. There are like specific answers and frameworks, but generally if you learn about nutrient density and about whole foods versus processed, then you don't have to get caught up in the next diet scheme, because there's usually always some truth to a diet, right? It can work, but I kind of know why it works, right? It's like, why does a vegetarian diet work? Well, you're eating whole foods, you have some animal nutrition, you're being intentional, right? So that it gets less confusing when you learn a little more. And then you can do, if there is a new diet, you could say, okay, I know why that works, or I can take pieces of that and use it.
Absolutely. And I would still like to take the time, though, to make, like you said, let's talk about the bioavailability and the nutrient status of some of these things, and why animal products, especially in today's world, are probably great for a lot of people. Because it's very sad for me to talk about this, because these people were friends and I loved them both. And I do not mean this in any way as oh, hey, you were wrong type of thing. But and maybe it's just an anecdote, Brian, but
Mhm.
one thing that has really scared me is in my hometown of Doylestown, Pennsylvania, which is a northern-ish climate. You know, like we certainly get cold in the winter. I'll put it that way.
Mhm.
Because I think you nailed a part that we're not necessarily going to get to talk about today, but the equatorial,
Mhm.
the region that you're at, if you're closer to that equatorial region, you probably can get away with less animal stuff versus if you go farther away. That's a whole thing that Weston A. Price kind of showed, whether or not he even realized the significance of the geographical location they were at the time. But here's what happened. So there was this gentleman who owned a vegan juice place in my hometown. He had been doing that for approximately 10 years. And I mean, it was literally, he was a pharmacist by trade and then came into this. It was the highest quality ingredients that you could get. That was his whole shtick. And the whole reason that people came in, we were paying $14 for a smoothie like 10 years ago.
Mhm.
Not that this is appropriate now, but people have at least
Yeah.
accepted some of the crazy prices. It was nuts. And yet his business was always busy because you knew that you were getting the quality. This man, it was like early 60s or late 50s, his family found him keeled over from a heart attack. And
Mm.
then I had a very good friend, and I mentioned her name because I know she wouldn't care, but her name was Connie, and she had breast cancer at one point, was a raw vegan for 12 years, also in that same northern climate, and she passed away at 62 years old, like very suddenly. And so I don't know what to make of that. It's two people in my life. But there does seem to be some issue with this vegan thing from a longevity perspective. They're not able to do it long term. Although I will admit, and we'll say this, her and the other gentleman I'm talking about were some of the most vibrant, high energy people I had ever met at that age range, like genuinely. But
Mhm.
then out of nowhere, at least that's how it seemed to the outside world, they're gone. And so it's almost like, to your point, they were doing something so right, and it was probably the Whole Foods thing, but they're missing something. So I'll stop there, but I do believe now, of course, that animal products provide us with some nutrients and some things that maybe we just simply can't get from plant foods alone, and maybe that's leading to why they felt somewhat good and had high energy, but then all of a sudden they pass away. So, what case would you make for
Mm.
the bioavailability and the nutrient status for animal products?
Yes, you brought up a lot of great things, and this is this is all I think about, really. I love thinking about things from all different angles, and even I actually just heard about a guy, Simon Hill. He's a famous vegan. The Proof, I think, is his podcast. He just did these long podcasts about how he has arterial plaque, and he's been vegan for 10 years and has a CAC score that isn't what he wants. He has, heart, basically the beginnings of heart disease. And so, and the number one killer of vegans is still heart disease. I mean, they claim that they die less than the average person, but of course, the average American is eating terribly, but they're still dying of strokes and heart disease. So I guess I'll answer the nutrient density part too first. So it's just basic fact, nutritional science that animal foods have protein and vitamins and minerals that are more bioavailable and complete. And this is just what we use in the literature. There's two systems to look at amino acid scores of protein, the PDCAS or DIAS systems, and they are anchored at the top with all animal foods. In milk and eggs and meat are the gold standards for this scale of usable amino acids for the body, protein. And then you go down from there to plant foods being below it. You can have some isolated pea proteins that can get higher, but that's still, a highly processed isolated food that still doesn't have the complete amino acid profile. So basically it's just scientific fact that animal protein is more bioavailable and complete. And so it's just weird that the narrative out there is a lot people are saying to eat less animal foods when it's scientific fact that they have better and more complete protein, which most people need, especially as you age. You need more protein. A lot of older people have sarcopenia. They're losing their muscle mass. They have osteoporosis. They're not getting enough calcium and full protein. So to zoom out a little more, the nutrient density uh, is a big thing that I like to look at, and the nutrient density of your diet. And so food is four things. It's protein, it's vitamins and minerals, it's fat, and it's carbs. I mean, these are just the macros plus vitamins. This is what food is. And the first things, protein and vitamins, minerals, are your nutrients. And then the fat and carbs are generally energy. right? So the nutrients are building your body, right? Proteins, vitamins, minerals. This is what your organs, your bones, your muscles, everything is made of. These are bodybuilding foods. This actually goes to some Weston Price stuff. You mentioned Weston Price. He's a legend. Uh, these are your bodybuilding foods, and then fats and carbs. Well, fats, of course, have essential amino fats and fat soluble vitamins and stuff that we really need to build our bodies as well. But generally, fats and carbs for energy, and they get you through the day, right? We need energy to get through the day. But these are very different types of calories. I push back against the calorie narratives, right? It's just, oh, you just need to count your calories, eat less calories. It's all about calories, just create a calorie deficit, right? There's all these narratives out there. I'm like, this is insane. What calories are we talking about? Are we talking about bodybuilding, amazing foods, nutrients, protein, vitamins, minerals? Are we talking about, empty carbohydrates, empty fats that aren't helping us at all? And so for all of history, we had high nutrient diets and correct energy. And recently, it's been flipped. People are looking, my hands have flipped. Now diets are low nutrient, high energy, right? And this is basically nutrient density. It's just sort of this nutrient to energy ratio. And so I don't know if this is getting too nerdy or technical. I'm a mechanical engineer, but this is what food is. And if you look at any good diet, it has a high nutrients and the correct amount of energy, right? You need, and so this really gets to the point of why processed foods are bad, because processed foods pretty much 99% of the time are low nutrient, high energy, right? And then if you eat that over time, your body is just like, okay, we're not getting our nutrients, so you keep eating. And now because the food is just low quality, low nutrient density, your body has to eat more of it to get the same amount of nutrients that it needs. And then of course, you have too much energy, you have to store it. You have to store it as fat. This is so simple. I don't know why people don't kind of think of it this way or talk about it. I haven't heard really anyone talk about food in this way, maybe because we're getting nerdy and it's taking me, 10 minutes to explain it. But
Okay.
like this is what we should be talking about out there right now. There's kind of diet wars, and I'm online. I'm not saying that it's bad to be on social media. I do a lot of social media under my Food Lies account, but it's, plant versus animal or this, that. There's all these people getting into different little tribes and wars when it's just as simple as give your body what it needs, give it the nutrients it needs and the energy it needs, but in the right ratio, in the right ratios that we've always had as humans, no matter where we live, close to the equator, away from the equator. Up in the north, we're eating way more heavy animal diets, but we didn't have all this excess fats or carbs from processed foods. And same thing with the equator. If you go out in nature and you eat foods, even with our human instincts that we used to have more of, that we would get the correct amount of nutrients and energy from the foods around us. So it's only when the modern food system came in, especially in a big way in the last 50 years, that ratio that has been thrown off, right? When you start processing foods, our bodies don't recognize them in the same way, and they don't have what they need. And I know I've been going on a little diatribe here, but there's one more good example that they do rodent studies, and they'll take a diet. They have rodent chow, right? And it has a certain amount of protein and carbs and fats that these rodents need. And they give one, and the group, the mice are fine, and they have the correct body weight. They live the correct amount of time, and they produce offspring in a certain way. Then they take that exact feed and they mess with the ratio and just lower the protein, right? They're lowering the nutrition, the nutrients, and they raise the fat and carbs to more energy. And the mice just ate more of that food, even though they're exactly the same otherwise. The mice didn't know, and they had the two groups. And so with the lower nutrient food, which basically is just sort of an equivalent of processed food, they had to eat more of it to get the same amount of nutrients. And that group got fat, they got sick, they died earlier, and they had less offspring. And when they did the math, they looked at specifically the protein. Both groups actually ate the same amount of protein. That makes sense. So, but the group that had the lower protein rodent chow, had to eat more of it to get to that same amount of protein. Therefore, they ate more empty calories from fats and carbs. went above their energy needs and they got all the problems.
Oh, there's so much I'm thinking about here. If you guys have any last second, questions for Brian, let me know. I see someone. I have to shout this out. Someone said, "D-Town represent." I'm guessing you mean Doylestown. That is awesome that someone's on. That's not a particularly large place. Chris, are you currently in Doylestown? Or are you just from there? Let me know. I'm visiting for Thanksgiving, so just genuinely curious. That's awesome. Um, So with the vegan thing, then, because I've always tried to figure out what exactly happened to my friends. I know that they were older than me, but they're my friends. They're my mentors in a certain way, and it's still very sad to have lost them. And I never could understand. I'm like, how these people had so much energy. They were
Mm,
vibrant. I would honestly say they had very good skin too. They looked
mhm,
outside at least pretty healthy. But one thing I did notice is that they were particularly skinny, like not even just lean, but like actually skinny. So correct me, please, if I'm wrong, but
mhm.
is it fair to say then, based on the things that you were kind of talking about, if a raw vegan is truly getting super high quality food, like they're actually trying, because I know both of them were, it's almost as if they're getting like high nutrients then, but they're getting very low energy because they're not, I mean, they weren't eating a particularly large amount of calories. I doubt that they were getting enough protein. Would that be the way to say that in your system, or would you
Mm.
still argue that it's even low nutrients?
Uh, well, it's low it's protein, vitamins, and minerals are it's different. So they're getting maybe high phytochemicals, different plant nutrients, but they're not getting enough protein. So yeah,
Sure.
I kind of think of vegan diets as it's starving while eating, or it's like fasting while eating. And fasting is good in the correct doses, but if you're doing that chronically, you're creating stress in your body. You're not getting enough protein. You're losing muscle mass. Yeah, so there's a lot of other things that happen. So yeah, I think these people are not getting full, complete, and bioavailable protein, and yes, a lot of them are sort of emaciated. Honestly, they kind
Mhm.
of are starving. So yeah, I think it's really important to get that full full quality protein, keep that muscle mass, and also maybe they got too much. Um, well, they could have blood sugar problems without knowing it, right? If you're eating, if you all the raw juices, I mean, it's just a
Yeah.
lot, right? And so you can't really see that you're having problems with insulin a lot of the time. If you're Even if you have your glucose is kind of normal, you might not even know it. So I think that could cause problems long term.
Yeah, and guys, listen, I feel like Brian, you and I are actually very similar with this. I went through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition before I went through FDN, and listen, I liked FDN for the fact that I got all these labs and a much more advanced training. But one thing that IIN left me with that I'll always be appreciative of is they brought on a bunch of different speakers. You had vegans, you had paleo, you had not that carnivore wasn't really a thing at the time. I think keto might have been involved. So
Mhm.
you had these people that were telling you, "Hey, I feel a lot better now based on what I did." But to your point in the beginning, it's kind of obvious why that happens now that I know a little bit better. Because if you start on a standard American diet, if you thought McDonald's was
Mhm.
appropriate to eat at any point, let alone
Mhm.
5 days a week, and then all of a sudden you switch to any variation of a whole foods diet, I'd be shocked to find that you don't feel better. And it's very easy. I can't blame anyone for this. It'd be very easy to fall into like a dogmatic way of thinking that, oh, this must be correct then, because I feel so substantially better now that I've applied this. But my word to the wise here would just be it, it makes a lot more sense to me personally to look back what would have been done historically speaking, and these
Mhm.
little new fad things. And I'm talking even to carnivore. And I've done some periods of time where I've been mostly meat when I've done
Mhm.
keto. But the reality is, guys, there's not many people walking around right now that are purely carnivore for 10 to 15 years. We'll see. Maybe that's perfect.
Mhm.
We might find that it's not so perfect. I think a lot of the vegans are experiencing that, and it's very sad. So, if you want to be the guinea pig, God bless you guys, but
Mhm.
I don't necessarily want to do that. So, I think the whole foods approach with a strong bias, in my opinion, towards the animal side of things.
Mhm.
That seems to work very well. And even better, if you're actually tracking, this is one thing that drives me crazy. I wish I had the confidence in myself at that age to really speak to my older friends and let them know, let's just do some lab testing. I'll run it on
Mhm.
you for freaking free at that point to see where your body's at. Because I guarantee I could have seen something in Connie or my other friend that were vegan that would have shown them maybe a warning sign as to what's going on. So if you're tracking all this stuff, if you're really into the biodata side of things, you probably can get away with anything for a period of time and then stop before it gets really bad. I don't want to guarantee that, but it probably could happen. But if you're going to do a guinea pig experiment of a diet and not even track while you're doing it, well, that's interesting, and I'd be careful with that. The last thing I wanted to transition to today, if we can, Brian, because I'd be mad at myself if we didn't talk about
Mhm.
this. I'd love to talk about the Sapien Center. I am so excited to check this out. Genuinely, it's like, this is, whether or not you realize it, this is one of the reasons I moved to Austin, because I just knew things like this existed
Mhm.
here, which is sweet. So, what is the center all about? How can someone use it? Because we have a lot of listeners, not to mention practitioners in our group that are in Austin that would love to hear
Mhm.
about this.
Yeah. So I think part of being human, part of health is community, right? It's a big part of it. The blue zones is mostly true. The guy, Dan Buettner, just tried to say that they were plant-based, but they weren't. They were whole food based, and they exercised and they lived with nature and they had community, right? They had a sense of purpose. They lived with each other, all this stuff. And I think a lot of people are missing that. So Sapien Center is a place for that, of just really living with people that are taking health into their own hands. And I do want to do this more than just with the people in Austin. So
Okay.
yeah, I do have sapien.org, and we're doing a retreat in March. We're doing more stuff like that, where or even having like an online type of thing where you could visit each month and be part of our events that happen each month at Sapien Center. Even if you don't live there, we can put them on the calendar ahead of time, right? So and then you could travel to Austin during this event, and we have a big community together. And that's what we're doing actually for Friendsgiving, right? Just getting together around food, around real food, around people who have woken up, who don't believe all the narratives, take health into their own hands, all that stuff. So yeah, that's generally what Sapien Center is. We do events. I have an outdoor gym. We have co-working. We have sauna, cold plunge. We even have a fire pit. We have, we're doing all the things that I think humans have always done, right? We gathered together around fire. We gathered around food. We worked out together, we lived together. And so that's what it's all about. Yeah.
Dude, I love what you're doing, and I think it's so funny how our history is probably our future. And what I mean by that is, I genuinely believe as AI gets more advanced and the reliance on tech happens, I think we're actually kind of starting to see this shift already in certain people. I think there's going to be a demand for getting back. I always call it what it means to be human. So it's so funny too that it's named Sapien. Like, I love that,
Sapien, yeah.
because that's what it is. And I experienced it for real for the first time in 2018. I co-hosted a retreat with a friend, and we had 20 young people there. Now, it was a personal development retreat, Brian, so it wasn't necessarily about the food at the time. I was already into
Mhm.
that, but no one else was necessarily into it.
Mhm.
But when we had 20 of us together, only a few people actually knew each other. Most of these people were pulled from online from various places because of the other guy's social media following at the time, so they didn't know each other. And
Mhm.
it was so cool to watch over a 3-day period how everyone, they just find each other. They found the people that they needed to talk to. Life had a simplicity about it for those 72 hours. And what's cool is we purposely put into the schedule activities that maybe not our ancestors would have done, but the concept of what our ancestors would have done. So it
Mhm.
was in the Catskill Mountains in New York. We did hikes in the rain. We did the highest zip line in North America, which, again, I know that they wouldn't have done that, but
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
something challenging. It's an adrenaline
Yeah.
thing, but you're doing it with the tribe, if you will. And I just remember thinking, I'm like, oh, I will never forget that experience, because I understood instantly. I'm like, all of the ambitions that I have, which I like having, I don't hate it, but the ambitions, the bills, the weird little things that I think about, instantly out of the window. And this was my 20-person thing now, and every single day was the same thing. We got to find some food in some way or another, whether it's a
Mhm.
grocery store or whatever it might be. We got to find the food. We cook the food together. We share some stories and jokes at the end of the day. We do some kind of cool challenge, and then it would have been the same thing over and over again. And there is such a beauty and a satisfaction and a fulfillment in that simplicity. And I'm so glad that there's something like this here in Austin, in a very urban area. And I'm glad that you're trying to do it even more outside of Austin, because I think that's the future, man. I think there's going to be more demand for places like this. It's one of my goals to open one similar, not identical, but
Mhm.
similar in Eastern Tennessee. Everything I do right now is working towards my mom not having to work ever again and opening a center in Eastern Tennessee. So I think what you're doing is awesome.
I love that. It really is. I joke about it all the time too. The future, there's going to be the people that go down the mainstream path, and they're, by the data just showing, they're getting fatter and sicker. And then there's going to be a group of people that just wake up to this, are intentional about it, and we're going to almost be a different species at some point. We're just going to, that's what people say when they come to Sapien Center. They're like, why is everyone so vibrant and healthy and fit? This is crazy. So yeah, I agree.
All right, where can I know that you mentioned some of the stuff. I just like to ask it directly. Where can they find you and support you? Because you do have multiple things going on. So I just want to make sure you get a chance to explain what each of those things are. And then again, where can they follow and support you?
Yeah, sapien.org. I put out a free food guide there. You can just get on the email list. I don't spam you. It's just all like relevant stuff. You can find about the retreat, about anything that we're doing. And then Food Lies is on social media. So if you search Food Lies on Instagram or anywhere else, that's where I'm at. And yeah, please join the community.
All right, my friend, signature question for the show. And sometimes I can guess where the guest is going to go with it, but usually when I think I know, it's not what I thought. So let's find out. The signature question is this. If we could give you a magic wand, you could wave it and you could get all of our viewers and listeners to do just one thing for their health. So that means you can get us all to start doing one thing, or you can get us all to stop doing one thing. What is that one thing that Brian would get us to?
Well, it's radically reduce processed foods. Even learn what processed foods are and radically reduce those in your diet. You don't have to eat more meat like I do. You can eat more plants. Whatever it is, if you cut out the most processed things in your diet, it could be bread or pasta. I don't think those are whole foods at all. If you cut out these things, I think it's the single biggest thing you can do. Right? It's you eliminate as much as you can these processed foods. It will change your life. I think it's the biggest lever, right? Some people are like, oh, I'm going to go start exercising, or I'm going to do this. There's all these different things, which are all good. But I think the biggest lever is the radical reduction of processed foods in your diet.
Heard that, my friend. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on our podcast today.